Imagine finding yourself in a dark, stuffy, and massive subway station. Your surroundings are overflowing with hundreds of people rushing past you. The sharp smells of exhaust fumes, stale coffee, and wet concrete blend together in the air. Everyone is hurried, their faces blank and expressionless. The tempo of the footsteps is fast, almost forming a metronomic rhythm. You are right in the middle of the city's flawlessly functioning, mechanical life cycle. Right then, a man walking just ahead of you suddenly stumbles. He raises his hands to his chest, his face completely pale. Then, with a huge thud, he falls onto the hard concrete floor. You freeze where you are. Your eyes widen, practically frozen in astonishment. Struggling to breathe, you involuntarily scan your surroundings. Then, the chilling reality of that moment grips you. Everyone, absolutely everyone, has stopped and is looking at the man who collapsed. Some slow their steps considerably, others just turn their heads and continue to watch in silence. Cell phones appear in the hands of some, screens are fumbled with by trembling fingers. But no one approaches him. Not a single person reaches out a helping hand, not even a single voice calls for help. You feel a strange and heavy pressure in your chest. You feel a desire to help, your instincts constantly shout at you, take action. However, deep in your mind, from a dark corner of your subconscious, that silent whisper arises. Someone else will help anyway. With this many people here. Maybe there is a doctor among them. Someone more qualified than me, someone braver. What if I do something wrong? Everyone will look at me, I might make the situation worse. And just like that, you lower your head, quicken your pace, and walk away from that dark atmosphere. You leave behind that moment a human life ended, as a silent spectator. Welcome to the Delusion Chamber. Today, we will examine humanity's darkest, most shameful, and most silent paradox, the Bystander Effect. Our logic leads us to believe that we are always safer within a crowd. Doesn't more eyes mean more hands, more help? We would rather have something happen to us on a crowded street than be attacked all alone in a desolate forest. Because we have a deep-rooted belief that civilization, this crowd, will protect us. However, psychology reveals that this belief is nothing but a massive illusion. Studies show that as the number of people witnessing an emergency increases, the probability of them helping decreases proportionally. If you had been the only one around when that man collapsed in the station, the probability of you helping could have been 85%. Because the responsibility rests entirely on your shoulders. But as the crowd grows, things change. The brain immediately formulates a logical escape plan. Responsibility doesn't increase, on the contrary, it divides. Knowing there are so many people dilutes this responsibility like a drop of ink falling into the ocean, almost making it disappear. Among 50 people, your brain only takes on 2% of this responsibility. But this amount is not enough to compel you to take action. This situation does not make you a ruthless or bad person. Actually, you are not a monster. but you become a captive of an invisible psychological cage built from the inaction of other people. However, when you look at history, we see that this cage is an accomplice that turns a blind eye to the most brutal tragedies and horrific events. An event that took place on the cold night streets of New York in the winter of 1964 proves this in the most painful way. A young woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked after parking her car on the road at the entrance of her apartment. The killers stabbed her multiple times, and Kitty's cries echoed in the cold air, "Help me! I'm dying," she screamed. But these screams were not let out in a desolate oasis where no ear could hear them. They were let out on a crowded street surrounded by dozens of apartments. There were windows opened in panic and rooms eerily lit up. But everyone just looked and apathetically watched what was happening. The attack lasted exactly 35 minutes. The attacker first fled, then came back and stabbed her again. However, out of the dozens of neighbors living in that apartment, out of the hundreds of eyes looking from the windows, not a single one called the police in time. Help did not arrive. Kitty Genovese died on that cold asphalt, under silent and observing gazes. Why? How could people be so insensitive? The answer was hidden in the dark labyrinths of human nature. Because every neighbor saw that there was someone in another window too, everyone knew that everyone else was watching the situation. And the same sentence echoed in their minds: someone must have definitely called the police. There is no need for me to take action. In this abyss of responsibility, everyone waited, thinking someone else would do something. The winner of that meaningless roulette leading to death was silence itself. Following this tragedy, psychologists conducted various experiments to understand this eerie mechanism of human psychology. Perhaps the most famous of these experiments was the smoke-filled room experiment. A subject is taken into a small room to fill out a questionnaire. After a while, smoke begins to leak from the room's ventilation. If the subject is alone in the room, they anxiously stand up within a few seconds and try to call for help quickly. This is a result of the survival instinct. However, when the subject is put in the room not alone, but with 3 people who are part of the experiment and ignore the smoke, the smoke slowly spreads into the room, eyes burn, breathing becomes difficult. The subject starts to cough, looking around with uneasy eyes. But the other people around them are extremely calm. They continue to fill out their questionnaires as if they feel nothing. Guess what the outcome is? In most cases, the subject adapts to this bizarre situation and does not call anyone for help. Instead, they choose to remain motionless out of fear of being perceived as someone anxious and panicking. The inaction of others distorts reality over time, affecting the person's decisions. A distrust of the silence of the herd settles in instead of fear. Let's step out of this laboratory experiment and look at today. In today's society, the bystander effect has become increasingly terrifying. It has almost transformed into a culturally dystopian form. We don't just watch anymore. We take out our cell phones and record the pain, death, or tragedy in high resolution. When you look at the crowd gathered at the scene of an accident, during a fight, or in a scene where someone stands desperately on the edge of a bridge, you will not see hands reaching out to help, but only the glowing lenses of digital devices. A sea of people racing to turn the pain into consumable content to share the horror on social media and gather a few likes. Hiding behind the camera serves as a kind of moral shield. I'm just recording. Thus, being a spectator of events turns into a comfort zone equivalent to innocence. But that internet world overflowing with cameras, even though it is the noisiest, most crowded room in history, ironically turned out to be a place where we remain silent. Millions of people stare at the same tragedy at the same time. Without batting an eye, they stare at the injustice while scrolling through pages. Responsibility, on the other hand, is divided into thousands of small pieces and vanishes. In the crowd, everyone talks but no one takes action. Because this is no different from a grand illusion masterfully constructed by the modern world anymore. Turn to your inner world. You've always dreamed of being a hero, haven't you? You thought that when a difficult moment comes, while everyone else freezes, you would take action. That you would save a child from a burning car, that you would stop a fight. Movies instilled this belief in you. Your inner voice also whispered this dream into your ear. But there is one thing that doesn't shy away from telling the truth: mathematics. And mathematics never lies. You are not that hero. You are just someone who lowers their head and gets lost in a crowd with their footsteps in the subway station. You are a subject in a smoke-filled room who holds their own breath just because those around them aren't coughing. Well, imagine. What if the person lying on that concrete floor was you? As you look up at the hundreds of people surrounding you, unable to breathe, with an unbearable pain piercing your lungs, the only thing you could see would be the emptiness in their eyes. Those cowardly and desperate expressions that dare not call for help, hoping only for others to take action. While lying on the ice-cold asphalt, you look for a helping hand, but that hand never reaches out to you. You scream. However, your voice gets lost among the chaos of the crowd. And in that last moment, before you take your last breath, you realize, the most brutal reality of humanity is right in front of you. Everyone is there. But in reality, no one is there. The sound of a siren rises from afar. But it is too late now. The cameras turn off. The herd has already made its way toward a new distraction. Ask yourself this: if no one is watching, who are you, really? The doors of the Delusion Chamber are closing for today. Until we meet again in the dark, at the next psychological reckoning.